actually believe is that in the end, organizational performance is very simple. It boils down to the strategy part, which might include technology and might not, might include a resource. It's not that complicated. Either you do have a big stick to beat the crap out of your competitors with, or you don't. And if you don't, you make less money and you eat less good food. And as Eddie Murphy would say, you know, your wife ain't going to make love to you because you ain't got no money, and you ain't going to buy your son a G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip. Now, just to be clear, for anybody that does not know what a G.I. Joe with a Kung Fu grip is, this is, in fact,
you actually have one?
G.I. Joe. This is a G.I. Joe, new in the box.
Wow.
And you'll notice it says Kung Fu grip.
Dude, I didn't know those existed.
Well, they're rare. I got 3 G.I. Joes new in the box. You'll see there's 2 more boxes up there on the shelf. So let's talk about the other part of this, because they're interconnected. There's leadership, teams, and culture, all 3 of which you have to clearly understand. The functionality of an executive team boils down to simple things. Do the people trust each other well enough to be vulnerable enough to make the right kinds of decisions? And that does mean actually that, hey, if I have a boil on my butt as a member of a team, I have to be willing to put that out there and be vulnerable. I mean, and if you got a bunch of guys, that actually creates an issue sometimes because people don't want to be vulnerable. Truth be told, the best teams are really, really vulnerable. And so you got, do I trust them? Am I willing to put myself out there? Are we able to manage agreement effectively? Okay? So fundamentally that boils down to, do we have the ability to manage conflict and the paradox of conflict around it? And the paradox of conflict is simply, there's 2 kinds of conflict in life. There is I'm on a team with Clint Ballinger and I hate him. And I don't actually know why I hate Clint, but I just don't want to be around that guy at all. I don't like him, period. Clint is a slug and I don't like him. So that is relationship conflict, which can be exacerbated by task conflict. And task conflict is, Clint, I just don't get this idea. Let's talk about it. Here's an alternative. Let me ask you some really hard questions about your idea because I'm not sure that your idea makes any sense. Let's debate that out. That's a grand thing. A friend of mine recently came out with an academic article. His name is Chet Miller. And Chet's a cool guy, but the interesting thing about Chet is that he wrote a paper that said that teams that disagree actually were bad teams. And the Strategic Management Journal published this. And I'm like, what a big old piece of academic crap. This is why academics get in trouble, because there aren't any. If you go look at every great team, they all debate things vigorously and then have enough trust with each other they can walk away and talk about anything. They can debate anything. They can exchange on anything. They don't, you know, they're not, you know, they're not rattled by the debate and the discussion.
Is that tied? I was going to say, is that tied to the vulnerability piece also? So you could, if the team members are open to be vulnerable, then you're going to get conversations out there and decisions out there about a whole myriad of issues. They're not afraid to like bring stuff up.
That's right. And you just have to be ready to have the debate. But that means you got to trust each other. That means that you have to have respect for each other's capabilities. And you'll get tired of carrying somebody that, I mean, trust is not enough. You also have to respect their capability, because there's lots of people that you trust that don't belong on your team. I mean, you do actually have to be able to do the work. And everybody's like, well, which one would you like to have? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Why do I have to choose? On the teams we build, if you don't have the capability and the ability to build trust, we kick your ass to the curb. I mean, it's not a negotiation. It's not even, it's a crazy concept. You know, it's just like people will go through a process to select a new team member, and they'll go, well, we chose the best of what we had. And I'm like, what did you do that for? Well, these were the only alternatives. I said, no, there's always a fourth or a fifth alternative. You got 3 candidates, there's always candidate number 4. And there's an old country tune called from a artist nobody would remember named Sylvia, and she used to sing a song called Nobody. And sometimes nobody is the best choice you can possibly make. So, because once you make a bad choice, you set that team back years at a time. I mean, you don't really ever recover from screwing it up. I mean, and if you do, you have to go do scorched earth stuff and really hard things to get it, you know, the way you need it to be. It's super hard. Actually.
Yeah, it's really, really hard to undo an action like that. Hiring a teammate that just doesn't fit in, really tough.
Well, and the other thing that people don't get is that when you lose a team member or you gain a team member, the whole team becomes new. I mean, people walk around with this stupid concept that, hey, I'm a member of this team and therefore I'm a building block of this team. And I'm like, what? That's kind of arrogant. Why would you think you're a building block? No, the building blocks are the dyads, the pairs, the competitive pairs of people that together are the building blocks of the team. So the weakest link is the weakest relationship you have on the team. When somebody says, well, that person's the weakest link, I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. The weakest link is the 2 people that get along least well and actually function least well and are least aligned. So when you go past all the stuff we talked about, the vulnerability and ability to manage conflict and identity, the team, this is part of my identity, this is part of who I am. Once you get past that, you have to get to strategic alignment. And it is a horribly misunderstood concept. Vast majority of leaders never ever even know whether they're aligned or not. They believe they are, and that's normally based on words, but that's not actually how it works. Words are not a relevant measure of alignment. An appropriate measure of alignment is mathematics. As we say, alignment is mathematical. And so when I, as an individual, make a choice to emphasize something that takes up a percentage of my time and effort and energy and focus, that percentage versus another team member's percentage is the extent to which I'm aligned. It's not more complicated than that. But that creates a very complicated set of interactions. Because if I decide, so for instance, we do a lot of work for public utilities. I mean, you, Clint, with a PhD in nuclear something, nuclear engineering probably, as I remember.
It is.
So I have 9 active nuclear badges in that drawer right there.
Nice.
And so I am regularly in a nuclear plant, and you know we do a lot of healthcare work, and go into hospitals all the time. And I'll leave a nuclear plant and go to a hospital, and they'll say, man, we can't believe you go to such a dangerous place. And I was like, dangerous? I wasn't in any danger till I came here.
Right.
Hospitals are horribly dangerous.
Really dangerous.
Nuclear power plant's the safest place I've ever been in my life.
There you go.
I mean, it's just, the whole concept that nuclear is dangerous is complete insanity.
Yeah.
I mean, it's people just don't know. I mean, just look at the numbers. How many people died last year because of an overdose of nuclear exposure?
Right. None.
How many people died because the healthcare system made mistakes?
Right.
Third leading cause of death in the U.S., 396,000 people to be accurate and correct. Okay? So only heart disease and cancer kill more people than going to the hospital. I mean, when you walk in the door, it's one of the most dangerous places. And you go, well, why is that? Well, because the teams don't function, the culture sucks, and the leaders couldn't lead army ants to sugar water. And so you end up literally allowing people to die. Literally allowing people to die. And when we go do an intervention in a hospital, all we go do and work on is the leadership team, the functionality and alignment piece, the functionality of the leaders, and the functionality of the culture. That's what we go work on. And the average hospital that follows the plan that comes from that assessment lowers mortality 35%.
Holy cow. Do you think,
and by the way,
I always thought
of people that died.
That's crazy, man. I always thought hospitals were a little bit unique as far as a business goes because it seems that they promote their own doctors, so you're a medical doctor that could make you completely ill-suited to run an organization, but that's who sort of gets propagated through the system and propped up as like the top management team it's all MDs. And if it's not, then you don't get any respect from the other people.
Well, and there's something to that. And I would tell you that I regularly advocate for physicians and nurses to lead healthcare systems. I think that's the future. However, they do have to be able to lead, and most physicians couldn't lead. They couldn't lead chickens across the road. I mean, they're just terrible at it. But we actually built a program called the Physician Leader Academy that we've run for 5,000 physicians across the country, and we believe it's the keys to the kingdom. It's the single most important activity that we probably ever engaged in. And even the ones that we couldn't win over win their perspectives over the first go around, we almost always, in the end, they'll come back to us years later and go, yeah, we had to adopt all that stuff anyway because, it was the right thing to do. I mean, it's just like leadership. Everyone, especially the academics, they've made leadership this very complex thing when it's not. It's followership. Do my people want to follow me? Which boils down to, do they trust me and do they respect me? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of step number one. And step number two is, in the leadership literature, there's 4 leadership styles and 16 leader behaviors. And your job is to go figure out how much of each one of those leadership styles the people that follow you actually want. Hmm. And you do those 2 things, and you'll be a better leader than 99% of the entire world. Period. I mean, vast majority of people don't even know what the leader behaviors are, and they never thought about whether their people respected and trusted them.
Yeah.
And